Welcome to Terrorific, the place where it's perpetually spooky season. I'm your host, Brandon O, and in this week's episode, we'll be chopping up Paranormal Activity. But first, some quick housekeeping. I'm scrapping the 24-hour stay competition, I'm scrapping BFT moments, but I'm keeping the same lineup of movies. Frankly speaking, I had a recent epiphany and realized that episodes 11 and 12 kinda sucked. It felt like I was trying to force this season to fit the structure of season 1. When the entire point of this whole show is to have complete freedom of creative expression. I was self-sabotaging, but yay for self-awareness. So for the rest of this season, I will instead be focusing on each film on its own and exploring the elements within that film that I found the most amusing and or thought-provoking. And the element that I found most thought-provoking in Paranormal Activity is that despite all of its fantastic scares, which have aged decently well, by the way. At its heart, this movie is about a toxic relationship. Rather than running through a list of top scares that you can easily find in numerous YouTube compilation videos, I will instead be illustrating how those scary scenes tie into the overall theme of toxicity. So let's get it. On Rotten Tomatoes, Paranormal Activity holds an approval rating from critics of 83%, but only 57% from audiences, which, frankly, I was surprised to see that. I didn't see an audience consensus, but after scanning, a few comments, slow burn was the most common ding. But the critics' consensus is that, quote, using its low-budget effects and mockumentary method to great result, Paranormal Activity turns a simple haunted house story into 90 minutes of relentless suspense. And I'm with the critics on this one. At this point, I've seen the movie like 5 times, but the very first time I saw it, I definitely remember feeling 90 minutes of relentless suspense. But of course, Paranormal Activity's biggest claim to fame is that it took a budget of $15,000 and turned it into a $194 million worldwide gross. That is absolutely insane. Now, some sources do say that additional funds up to $200,000 were put into the budget after rights to the film were acquired by Paramount Pictures, but regardless, estimates still have the ROI somewhere around 645,000%. Holy moly. The film was produced, written, directed, photographed, and edited by Oren Peli, who immigrated to the US from Israel at the age of 19. The story was inspired by Peli moving into his first house all alone and without any family nearby, which I found interesting because the lead character, Katie, although not literally alone, did appear to seem figuratively alone due to the constant gaslighting by the other lead and her character's partner, Micah. So now let's break down the moments in the film that highlight just how toxic this relationship was, and in particular, how much of an absolute dickhead Micah was. Like, my God, this dude was an asshole. Early on in the film, Katie tells Micah that something paranormal has been plaguing her ever since she was 8 years old. Which begs the question, on which date number are you supposed to casually mention to someone that you grew up haunted? I mean, that's pertinent information to have, because Katie and Micah had been dating for 3 years at this point in the film. And so they moved in together and all this shit. Like, had he known that she was haunted, that might have changed things. And she probably was aware of that and didn't want to lose him. Therefore, she held it in until it was too late for him to get out. He actually brought this up in the film. He called Katie out for not mentioning it sooner. And she said, when should I have told you that? Should I have brought it up on our first date that, hey, I have a demon haunting me? And he's like, no, but you could have brought it up on our 15th date or our 30th date or when we decided to move in together. And he absolutely has a valid point there. And it's probably the only good point that he made in the entire movie. This is an undeniable toxic move from Katie. Waiting until someone has fallen in love with you before telling them that you've been haunted by a demon for the past 15 years of your life is completely unhinged behavior. But 2 wrongs do not make it right. And Micah was on some shit, boy, let me tell you. This man put on a masterclass in what not to do when haunted. First of all, he's filming everything, which Katie did not want to happen to begin with. She was afraid that it would exacerbate the entire situation, but Micah says, fuck it, bro. YOLO. He's completely disregarding her feelings on the situation. And he later justifies his behavior by confronting Katie with the fact that she did not tell him that she was haunted to begin with. So now he has, in his mind, free reign to do whatever he wants to do and record whatever he wants to record. Toxicity breeds further toxicity. But throughout the film, it's clear that Micah isn't really taking this haunting very seriously. He thinks it's a game. It's his golden ticket to be able to sell this footage for, some kind of infamy and recognition. He's not taking it for what it actually is, which is a threat to his life. And Katie spends a lot of time trying to tell him that this is a serious threat, a real threat. And still, he is so dismissive of her warnings. He's so dismissive of her fear and growing anxiety. The more anxious and afraid she becomes, the more excited and greedy Micah becomes. He refers to all the paranormal activity as cool stuff. He taunts the demon on multiple occasions using words like worthless and little fucker. Little fucker. Can you imagine calling a demon a little fucker? And if you are that demon, it's like, bitch, what? Okay. I'm pussy? Okay. Micah really wants to communicate with the demon, and so he tries to convince Katie to allow him to get a Ouija board, and she understandably and rightfully says no. But she sees that he's not completely convinced, has like a mischievous look on his face, so she's like, hey, promise me you won't go out and buy a Ouija board. And he says, okay, I promise you I won't go out and buy a Ouija board. Well, later on, he sits down with the Ouija board and Katie is like, what the fuck? You promised me you wouldn't do this. And as we all know, toxic people tend to be masters of manipulating language and semantics. So he says, well, no, I promised you I would not go out and buy a Ouija board. And I didn't buy this Ouija board. Someone gave it to me. Dickhead's gonna dickhead. And then we get to the scene with the powder and the footprints, which, by the way, what a great scare. So simple, so effective. But the very first time I saw this, I was scared shitless, bro. Because those footprints, they clearly were not human feet. They were like hooved and shit. I was like, hey, yo, hell nah. Love it. So Micah had laid powder out in the hallway, and the demon had walked through it, tracked his footprints into their room, but the footprints do not leave the room. So they're understandably scared and freaking the fuck out. So they grab the camera, start walking down the hallway, which leads them to the closet, and they look up and see that the little attic door is ajar. And Katie basically begs Micah not to go up into the attic, but he does anyway. And she's scared out of her mind. And this shows that he continues this pattern of disregarding her feelings. He is driven by his own curiosity or his own desire to capture this demon for whatever reason it may be. And he thinks that he's in control and that he can handle things on his own. Katie wants to call a demonologist in, wants professional help, but Micah is insistent upon the fact that he can protect her. He can defend her. He tries to position himself as this knight in shining armor, when really that's not what it's about in the slightest. Katie is so desperate for a solution that even though she's fully aware that the house is not haunted, it's her, the demon is following her, she still tries to convince Micah to leave, pack up and leave. And he says something along the lines of, no, we're not going anywhere. You're my fucking girlfriend. I'm going to beat this thing. I'm going to protect you because you're my girlfriend. And there it is. Micah sees this whole thing as some sort of macho competition. He's not looking at Katie as a person. He's looking at her as something to win and possess, which is highly ironic because that's exactly how the demon sees her too. It becomes this battle of possession, figuratively versus literally. But regardless of which side emerges victorious, the end result is the dehumanization of Katie herself. And then the final ball-shaped cherry placed upon the top of Micah's I'm a dickhead cake. is in a scene towards the end of the film where he and Katie are in an argument. She's at her wit's end. She's frustrated. She's just trying to study because she's a college student or a grad student as well. And Micah's all in her face with the camera trying to show her some shit and getting mad that she doesn't want to look at it right then and there because, he's a child. And as she storms off, he yells at her, "Hey, I didn't bring this thing into the house. You did." And she's like, "Wow, Micah, that's fucked up." Understandably so. And as she continues to storm up the stairs, he tells her, "Yeah, go hang out with your friend up there. Have fun." And then he somehow seems shocked or surprised that she falls down to the ground sobbing in absolute tears. Bro, what did you expect? She's never been this afraid of anything in her life. And here you are telling her to just fucking have a picnic with a demon. Go fucking paint your toenails together and have girl talk. What the fuck, bro? What an absolute douchebag. So if you sum up all those parts, one can make the argument that Paranormal Activity is an allegory for misogyny and emotionally abusive relationships. Both Micah and Katie did some fucked up things. Well, Katie did one fucked up thing, singular, but it was a hugely fucked up thing. Deliberately omitting information and taking away another person's agency in a situation that is a risk to their well-being and literal life is completely inexcusable. And Micah's pattern of being dismissive of Katie's fears, her desires to leave the house, her anxiety, only really taking it into consideration if it helped contextualize his own motivations and desires. That's fucked up. He was constantly telling her to chill out and things like that, acting like she was overreacting to this thing that she had been experiencing for 15 years, that he'd only experienced for 15 days, as if he was the subject matter expert. It's crazy. And it also illustrates the fact that just because someone is in love with you or loves you, that doesn't necessarily mean that they respect you or even like you. So that's Paranormal Activity as viewed through my lens in 2025. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, all that good stuff. Keep helping the show grow. And we'll see how this new direction plays out for the rest of the season. But I'm fairly confident that there's one thing that will never change. And that's that I will always keep it spooky.